No! Friendly.
Who are you? Who sent you?
Nobody. There was an accident down the road and... What's going on?
Oh, no. They're coming.
Who is? What the hell was that?
You have a gun?
What?
Please tell me you have a gun.
No, why would I?
Something like it's there. Take it! Take it!
No, it's out. Are you listening?
Hey!
What the...
My relationship with the Resident Evil franchise is weird and surprisingly rocky, which seems to perfectly align with the series as a whole. I started with Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition on the PS3. I was so excited after hearing many times over how crucial the franchise was in kicking off the survival horror genre, and being old enough to start dipping my toes into the realm of spooky media, I couldn't take my eyes off the shimmering yellow box. Looking at all the included DLC, I thought I had months of horror goodness to immerse myself in. But my excitement quickly turned into a dull sense of familiarity. The game was simply not scary at all. The graphics were fantastic, the gameplay was snappy, but in a generation oversaturated with zombie games, I couldn't distinguish anything that made this game stand out from the rest. It took me a year to beat the campaign because I kept picking it up and putting it back down, never touching any of the DLC or extra goodies included in the package. As a self-proclaimed horror aficionado, I felt it was almost a requirement, a responsibility, to like this game and this franchise. Eventually, I went back and played Resident Evil 4, thinking maybe 5 was just a misstep in the franchise. As a diehard Sonic fan, I am very familiar with these types of games. Similar to the first Resident Evil, 4 was revered as a revolutionary title that changed the way we played video games. And while I could see this impact even at a young age, I felt the game was dated by modern standards. Keep in mind, this was an age where Swim was brainwashed into pretty much only playing COD for 3 years straight. That Swim is no longer with us. I skipped 6 entirely because, well...
Are you kidding me? Jesus Christ!
I paid no mind to the franchise again until, like many, it caught my eye with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, the start of what many have dubbed the Capcom Renaissance. With a fresh perspective, new setting, and return to its horror roots, I knew that this was the one I was waiting for. And I was right. Despite only playing through it twice, I can vividly recall a large majority of that game because of the impact that it left on me. Capcom followed it up with a superb Resident Evil 2 remake, which is not only my favorite of the franchise, but became one of the most terrifying games I have ever played. For like the first 2/3. It took me a little longer to play RE3 Remake, and while I didn't enjoy it as much, I appreciated the more action-y take on the franchise while still maintaining horror elements. Something that crops up again maybe later. So after 3 quality titles in a row, I found myself actively excited for a new Resident Evil game for the first time. A gothic horror aesthetic with vampires and werewolves on a next-gen console? Yeah, I tend to like games like this. But what I got was so much more than what my expectations led me to believe. Despite an initial 10-hour playthrough, this is a beefy game. There is so much in here, it's impressive it all even works within that small time frame. And that's not even counting the stuff that unlocks after you beat it. With how much hype, marketing, and ambition was surrounding this release, it could have easily buckled under its own aspirations. Thankfully, Resident Evil 8 Village is an astonishing game that brings some more fast-paced action back into the series without losing sight of its horror roots. The result is a game that'll have you howling at the moon. Let's get the main gripe I have with the game out of the way first, and that has to do with our leading man,
Ethan Winters.
Mr. Winters. Ethan Winters.
Ethan. Poor Ethan.
an appropriate last name since his impact on the series I feel is leaving a relatively cold impression.
You couldn't save him. He was already gone.
Leave me alone.
For the majority of the game, he's the same stale loaf of bread that he was in 7. But in that game, it sort of worked as he was a normal everyman caught in a situation that was way out of his element. But after dealing with that situation and having a few years of vague military training, I was hoping to see a bit more confidence and charisma about him. I'm not asking for Han Solo, but a dash of actual personality goes a long way because there are parts where I perked up and was like, oh, okay, Ethan.
Rest while you can, because I will hunt you, and I will break you!
Go ahead, do your worst.
But for the most part, he's just spewing goofy dialogue like this.
Ethan, go! Save your daughter!
Elena, don't give up! Reach for me! God damn it! Why is everyone dying on me?
Shit, I don't even know. I can't even tell you that.
It's made all the more apparent when every other character has unique personalities that should cement many of them as gaming icons. Lady Dimitrescu's gaudy mannerisms and graceful movements juxtaposed by her daughter's diseased appearances and thirst for blood instantly creates a line of villains that, in lesser games, would carry their own storylines. Heisenberg's cocky arrogance with the skills to back it up set up an antagonist you can't wait to take down. And what the other two lords lack in their personalities are made up for in the design of their areas. Now, many were excited for Chris Redfield's return to the franchise after we got that tease in RE7, but he's relatively absent for most of the game and doesn't make too much of an impact. He's also like an annoying dumb. Personally, I hate the trope of government man with secrets won't tell protagonist secrets because the secrets are too secretive. Because it always leads to scenarios that could have been avoided if they just let the main character in on the plan. This entire game could have literally been avoided if Chris had just not been a stupid. Even his squad mates towards the end commented on it later like, dude, you should have just told him. But then we wouldn't have a game, so whatever. Now, the actual narrative has you rescuing your baby instead of your wife this time, and it's alluded to that your baby has special powers. But the draw of the story doesn't come from trying to get your kid back. Rather, it's more so about why they were taken in the first place. Figuring out what's happened in the village, who this Mother Miranda is, and where the Lycans come from is all really intriguing stuff that leads to some pretty cool lore implications for the entire franchise. And the ending is a bit emotional despite being led by someone less interesting than a silent protagonist. My favorite part was how the game kept surprising me. I guess this is more of a kudos to Capcom's marketing than the game itself, but I was pretty certain that half of the game you would be in the castle fighting vampires, and the other half you would be in the village fighting werewolves, and that was it. I thought Heisenberg and Lady D would represent the two halves of the game, and Mother Miranda would just be some demonic witch thing that gets resurrected at the end and you blow it up with an RPG or something. But that's not the case. Upon entering the village, you are soon met with every villain you're going to have to take down, giving you an immediate sense of purpose. From there, the game is able to take you on a horrific roller coaster filled with dark twists and turns. Like seriously, some of the stuff that goes down in this game is metal as f***. And while what's happening is for the most part played straight, it still has a sense of that Resident Evil campiness that keeps you from being completely overwhelmed in despair. It's by no means a groundbreaking narrative, or even an all that great one, but it was enough to keep me interested the whole way through. The ending especially has me excited about where they can take the franchise from here. I really don't have too much to say about the gameplay because it's just a snappier, improved version of RE7. Also, quick tip, if you're on console, turn off camera acceleration in the settings, the game will feel so much better. The gunplay is really, really satisfying, which is something most horror games lack the confidence to do. Many rely on clunky controls to instill the horror rather than the horror itself. But often this frustrates more than it terrifies. I appreciate a horror game that gives you the tools to put up a fight, because that plants the idea in your head that you can only run and hide for so long. Eventually, you're gonna have to face your fears, and there are plenty of great boss fights and enemies in this game where you do just that. The inventory system is also my favorite of any Resident Evil. Going back to the RE4 style of inventory management, you can rotate, reorder, and organize your items in such a way that they fit like Tetris blocks, allowing you to carry more than you may initially believe. Additionally, key items are now kept in their own section and do not take up space. This is easily the biggest improvement in the game, and one I hope becomes a mainstay of the series. Old heads and series purists may disagree, but it is simply not fun to go through a giant chunk of the game only to run into a scenario where you're smacking your head saying, "Oh, I need the heart key right now, not the diamond one," and then trek all the way back and forth. Having all my key items on hand at all times actually encouraged me to explore the village and all its side paths more, because all I had to do was get to where I wanted to go, rather than having to go back and forth to store things in a chest. This allows you to focus more on blowing heads off werewolves and getting more things that help those heads pop even easier. The Duke is not only the best character in the game, but a crucial vendor you must interact with if you have any hope of getting through some of the later sections of the game. You can buy new weapons and crafting recipes, upgrade your firepower, sell items, and even cook some tasty meals that give you permanent stat buffs. My only complaint with the Duke is that the cooking and recipe option unlocks far too late in the game. Capcom themselves even highlighted this as a feature, and after killing some chickens and pigs early on, I didn't think it was unreasonable that I could sell the ingredients to him and he would cook a dish right then and there. Thankfully, I didn't sell any of the rare ingredients you can find, but I was definitely robbed of a few stat buffs because this feature doesn't unlock until a quarter of the way through the game. Now, once you beat the game, you unlock New Game Plus, which is always appreciated, as well as the return of the Mercenaries mode, which is only held back by the small number of maps. I just can't get enough of this combat. Shooting the weapons out of enemies' hands, blasting fire arrows out of the sky, and blocking an incoming swing to push the enemy back into an explosive barrel just makes you feel like a badass in a way that's more grounded than games like Doom or Uncharted. Not that either of those styles are bad either. I just want more RE8. So please, open the castle doors once more, Capcom. Okay, so just for future reference, I think I'm going to start grouping graphics and sound together because they both kind of work hand in hand. You could show me the most vile, terrifying monster in the world, but if it kind of just stumbles out silently, I'm not going to be very intimidated. Thankfully, this game has excellent sound design and visuals. The opening of the game really highlights this. As you walk through a pitch black forest, you can hear low snarls and twigs snapping all around you, really emphasizing the fact that you are going to be constantly hunted this entire game. Emerging from the forest, you are met with a breathtaking yet ashen looking vista that gives you a glimpse of the terrors that await. Inside the castle interior, light bounces around in a mesmerizing way. One puzzle even feels like the sole reason for its existence was to just flex the lighting in the game. The wood and porcelain textures glisten in such a way that invites you to just run your hand along the side of them. Truth be told, I just want to touch everything in this game. And yes, I mean everything. I unfortunately had to play this at 1080p despite playing it on a PS5 because I do not have a 4K game capture card, but the trade-off for this was a near constant 60 frames per second. I have gone back and started another playthrough at 4K, ray tracing, targeted 60 FPS, and honestly, you can't go wrong no matter how you play this game. It's going to look amazing no matter what. The one thing I do wish we had was an FOV slider. I get having a more close-up view can heighten the sense of fear as enemies get right up in your face, but sometimes it felt a little clunky or disorienting having everything pressed up against the screen at all times. Especially with next gen, I just feel an FOV slider should be a standard on consoles moving forward, but it's not a deal breaker. Overall, the game looks and sounds amazing. The RE engine has already demonstrated it is capable of some pretty great stuff, but this is really next level. The monsters look monstery, the frame rate is mostly solid, 3D audio does a good job indicating where things are happening. It just flows together so cohesively and not only adds to the scares, but also adds to the sense of place. It really feels like you are traversing a town that has been hit with an unspeakable tragedy. So, should you buy Biohazard 8 Village of Shadows? Yes, I think that kind of goes without saying at this point. But of course this is the internet, so people don't care if it's good or not, they want to know if it's better than the previous one. Things just can't be good on their own anymore. And honestly, it's a tricky question to answer, because it comes down to preference. Resident Evil 7 is definitely the scarier, more focused affair, but I honestly prefer this one just because it's more fun to play. I feel more inclined to return to this one more than I ever did with 7. And there's just a lot more to see and do in this game as well. It comes down to what you like in your Resident Evil experience. Do you prefer the slower, more horror experience like Resident Evil 2 Remake? Or are you more down with the action-y spin on the series akin to Resident Evil 4? Personally, I love both styles and more times than not would skew towards the traditional horror route, but video games, even horror ones, are about having fun at the end of the day, and 8 just gave me a better time, and really left me anticipating the next entry more than 7. And seriously, that's not to say this game isn't scary at all. Everyone rightfully points to Beneviento's house as the highlight of the game, but there were still some intense moments with Lady D and even Heisenberg's factory that got under my skin. Regardless, it's nice to see Capcom is still on a hot streak with this long-running series, and I hope they continue this momentum going forward. With the absence of Silent Hill and Dead Space, and other horror titles focusing mostly on being walking sims now than interactive experiences, Resident Evil is kind of carrying the horror genre on its back. All in all, Resident Evil 8 is a stellar entry in the series, and a desolate journey through a gothic nightmare. In life and in death, glory to the village. 9 out of 10. If you found yourself here and you liked what you saw, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to share all your thoughts with me on Resident Evil 8. This has been Swim with Cooldown Gaming, and thanks for watching.